Roster cutdown day looms large for the Baltimore Ravens. That's coming up tomorrow. We talk about our final 53-man roster predictions and so much more coming up next year on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today, making us your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube and audio form wherever you get your shows. We are 5 days a week of Ravens content, of course. So Monday through Friday, bringing you the daily Ravens coverage, and we do bonus episodes, live editions after every single Ravens game and after every single Ravens piece of big news. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We are 1 day away from the Ravens having their final 53-man roster. And as promised, if you were keeping up with me throughout the weekend and all the episodes I did, I kind of kept hinting at it, kept saying it was going to happen. Here today, we are going to do final roster predictions. Offense, defense, special teams, although small spoiler, special teams pretty straightforward if you're the Ravens. I can tell you that right now. It's Justin Tucker, Jordan Stout, and Nick Moore. Surprise, there's a spoiler. We're going to be diving into it, though, because as I was doing this, and I have my handy-dandy spreadsheet notes right in front of me here, there were ways where I kept pretty much everyone I wanted to, and that's a good thing. Now, there are maneuvers that had to happen here. I think he gets a little dicey when we talk about the handshake deals a little bit. So we'll get into all of that. We'll talk about offensive and defensive decisions, and then maybe other areas the Ravens could potentially add at when it comes to after cut down day. Maybe a team gets rid of somebody. The Ravens want to add that guy, or maybe there's just a player out there that they're going to sign for depth purposes, or maybe even to play a decent role at the start of the season. So let's dive right into it. Again, we'll do offense in the first segment, defense in the second segment, then just kind of round it all out in the final one. Starting with quarterbacks, I have the Ravens keeping 2, Lamar Jackson and Josh Johnson. Obviously, the big question mark, controversy, if you want to call it that, is Devin Leary and whether he would make the roster or not. I think you can get Devin Leary on the practice squad. Obviously, it's not a guarantee, but I would hate for them to keep Devin Leary and then lose somebody else who we're going to be talking about later down on the show here, where Josh Johnson is your backup. Devin Leary would be this developmental quarterback, and I don't think, look, you can find developmental quarterbacks. You can find that. Honestly, if it's Emory Jones on the practice squad, instead of if Devin Leary gets claimed and you put Emory Jones on the practice squad instead, okay, I know you can do the whole emergency third quarterback. There's a whole new rule with that and everything, but keeping 3 quarterbacks on the roster, it would have had to be for a guy that you feel like could have some level either of immediate impact or developmental traits. And while obviously there's not going to be an immediate impact factor with the quarterback position with Lamar Jackson there and even Josh Johnson, I didn't see enough from Devin Leary to really put confidence in me that, oh yeah, this guy, because look, Josh Johnson's not the long-term quarterback too. I didn't see enough from Devin Leary to say, yeah, this guy can be the long-term guy after Josh Johnson leaves. I think he might have to look elsewhere. I'm not necessarily saying Leary is just done and he has no shot. I would expect the Ravens to, look, if they kept him, I wouldn't be surprised. But I am predicting they only keep 2 guys, and that opens up the roster elsewhere. Going to running back, I have them keeping 3 guys, although with the recent injury news, I could totally see them keeping 2 if they want to, I guess, as we talked about just a couple minutes ago, scavenge the either free agent market or other players that are cut on cut down day. But Derrick Henry, Justice Hill, and I kept John Kelly on the roster, the vet the Ravens signed a couple weeks ago. He impressed me running against the Packers on Saturday. And I think as a veteran option, I think he can probably give you some special team snaps in there as well as a third running back. If the Ravens say, we're going to go with the guys on our roster right now, we're going to make do until Keaton Mitchell comes back, I think John Kelly is probably that guy for you. And I thought Chris Collier ran well and ran hard, But at that point, I would probably prioritize the veteran, and John Kelly is that over Chris Collier. Obviously, Owen Wright, for those who missed it, broke his foot on Saturday. He's going to be done. It's not season ending or anything, but 6 to 8 weeks around there. Again, it's subject, though. It's depending on how fast he recovers. And Rasheen Ali, we'll get to him a little bit later, but obviously, as you can tell from my roster, he is not on it right now. Fullback, Patrick Ricard. It's pretty straightforward. Only one guy there. 7 wide receivers. Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar, Tez Walker, Deontay Hardy, Tylan Wallace, and Dayton Wade. There was a lot of controversy about, should it be a guy like Dayton Wade or Tylan Wallace? What does that look like? Would they even be able to get Dayton Wade back on waivers? Would he survive it? I don't think Dayton Wade survives waivers. I think if you want to keep Dayton Wade, if you're the Ravens, you have to find a way to get him on your 53. But here's the thing. Tylan Wallace, he won that 6 wide receiver job. Now, if you're an everydayer with me on Locked On Ravens, you know this goes so far against everything I've preached on this show for probably 3 or 4 years now out of my 5 doing it, where I'm a big keep 6 wide receivers is the perfect number. I'm making an exception here, though. Again, it feels so weird to do this and to say this, but for the sake of talent, I did it, and I kept 7 wide receivers for the Ravens here because the controversy's been in, is Deontay Hardy really worth keeping on the roster if all he's going to be doing is returning kicks and having a minimal role on offense? Tylan Wallace, his special teams value, but do you keep him over a Dayton Wade who showed a lot? But Tylan Wallace also showed a lot as a receiver during the preseason too. So why would he be discounted for that? Dayton Wade showed a lot as well. So I said, you know what? We're just keeping everybody. We're keeping everybody. And part of it is due to the fact that I don't think they get Dayton Wade on waivers or they keep him on waivers. That is part of it. But also Dayton Wade, he earned a roster spot. He earned a roster spot. So it'd be tough. There are certain scenarios where Dayton Wade does not make this roster, and I wouldn't be shocked if he didn't. But it'd definitely be a gut punch if he didn't, and the Ravens lost him on waivers if that happened. 3 tight ends, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Charlie Kohler. Straightforward here. I think Kadir Ismail is a priority practice squad player, which we will talk about those guys in the final part of the show as we kind of go through the ways that I got this roster to the way I did. But 3 tight ends, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Charlie Kohler, straightforward stuff there. I don't think there's any controversy at that position. Offensive line. I kept 9 guys here. Ronnie Stanley, Andrew Voorhees, Tara Linderbaum, Daniel Falele, Roger Rosengarten, and then Patrick McCary, Ben Cleveland, Saleh, and Nick Samek. Those are the 9. I think that's, again, not too much controversy. I mean, I guess people, if they wanted another vet, Josh Jones, but I think Josh Jones lost his roster spot after Saturday when he had that terrible, poor miscommunication that caused Devin Leary to fumble the ball. And that was a strip sack, return 6. So, again, I don't think everybody was saying, even I was kind of questioning, was John Simpson, is Josh Jones the next John Simpson for the Ravens? I don't think so. I think that there will be some practice squad players, Darian Dalcourt, who played some center for them. But yeah, I don't think there's a lot of controversy here where these 9 guys, it's kind of what you're rocking with going into the season. Depending on what happens with Nick Samek and his injury, I don't think we've gotten any update on that yet. But if it's not serious, I do think it's these 9. And look, there's a whole nother conversation about who starts, who doesn't, but we're not talking about that right now. We're more so talking about who makes the roster. So that's all for offense. 2 quarterbacks, 3 running backs, 1 fullback, 7 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, 9 offensive linemen. I think that's pretty well balanced all across the board, right around the amount of offensive linemen you want to keep. Little heavy on the wide receivers, but again, you do it for talent here. So quick math, it is 5, 6, 13, 16, 25 players on the offensive line. So guess what? Even roster, because with my spoiler that special teams was going to be 3 guys, there are also 25 on the defensive side of the ball as well. 25, 25, and 3. But coming up in the second part of the show, we're going to be talking about the defensive side of the ball a little bit as we go more into the defensive line and some secondary controversy. Stay tuned, plenty to talk about here on the show. First, the show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And for me, I've had a ton of great experiences over on LinkedIn, networking, connecting, finding jobs. LinkedIn has it all. And LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Push a job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to push a job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back for our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Monday, going through final 53-man roster predictions ahead of cut down day tomorrow. Appreciate everybody here for making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every day. Be sure to make your second listen Locked On NFL, and also be sure to tune into Locked On Fantasy Football as we are gearing up for the fantasy football season, and it's really exciting. We're doing a bunch of Locked On Ravens fantasy leagues as well, so it's kind of, I'll just do however many in terms of interest we get. So if you're interested in that, I put out a tweet a couple days ago. You can message me on Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is, if you're interested in those. But fantasy football, really exciting times. And I love fantasy personally. But we talked about the offense, 25 players. I thought it was decently well balanced. I thought that I got everybody I wanted to on the roster. But on the defensive side of the ball, this is where some of the maneuvering comes into play. The handshake deals, potential guys you would want on the roster, but just there's not a spot for them. Let's start off with the defensive line. I have 4 defensive linemen making the Ravens roster. And this is where one of the handshake deals come in. And I think for a lot of people, it's pretty straightforward who this is. Justin Madubuike, Michael Pierce, Broderick Washington, and Travis Jones are the 4. The handshake deal would be Brent Urban, where he gets brought back after the fact, but this just opens up a roster spot to keep somebody, a young player who would not pass through waivers. Again, for example, maybe that is a Dayton Wade, and that's where you want to do the trade-off here. But Urban, handshake deal, ends up back on the Ravens roster. Defensive line is pretty straightforward, and it has been for multiple seasons now. It's been one of the more steady, consistent positions on this Ravens team. So that, to me, is it's one that doesn't really come with a lot of questions. Then for outside linebacker, I kept 5. Kyle Van Noy, Dafe Owe, David Ajabo, Tavius Robinson, Joe Evans. Joe Evans is my 5th. Obviously, if you're putting the pieces together, that means that Adisa Isaac did not make the roster. But we're going to talk about that in the final part of the show. So again, don't get too wild yet. We're going to talk about where these guys are going after the fact. But yeah, Adisa Isaac does not make the roster. Joe Evans does, but we'll be talking about why in the final part of the show. But I think, again, Joe Evans, he has done enough to earn a spot. And at the 4 straightforward, it's just really Joe Evans here. Would they keep 6 if they put Adisa Isaac on the roster? Depending on the injury and whatnot. But Joe Evans, to me, is a guy that plays hard, has a motor, can provide different value, special teams, whatnot. So I think he'd be a guy that the Ravens wouldn't get on waivers, and if they really like him enough, I would make an effort to get him on there. So Joe Evans on the roster there. 4 inside linebackers: Roquan Smith, Trenton Simpson, Malik Harrison, Josh Ross. This is another handshake deal. Chris Board is the other guy that I would assume makes the roster. I could also see Josh Ross not making the roster and then them being able to either put Adisa Isaac on the roster if the injury isn't, going to hinder him for a bunch of weeks, and then that's what you do. But to me, I think that Ross showed a lot of potential in that Eagles game, and I could see him being a practice squad guy if he does not make the final roster, but I currently have him on the roster for the Ravens. Cornerbacks, I have 6. Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens, Nate Wiggins, TJ Tampa, Jalen Armour Davis, Bump Cooper. Those are my 6. We're going to be talking about where some of these other guys are going, obviously, in the well, if we have enough time, we might do it in the second part of the show here, but if not, in the final part of the show. Bump Cooper is somebody who really impressed me over the course of preseason training camp. He was getting rave reviews. I think he's another guy they would lose to waivers. So to me, I think that having all these players would be good, and just to get all this young talent on the roster, and then you can kind of figure it out from there. But again, you have 4 guys, and Humphrey, Stevens, Wiggins, and Tampa that you're like, all right, yeah, they're making the roster. Armour Davis, I know people are very mixed on him in terms of what he brings to the table and if he deserves to be on the roster. I think he did enough to be on the roster. And then Bump Cooper is the guy where he's the undrafted player. And again, I think he did enough to earn a spot. So I have him on there. 6 safeties. Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, Eddie Jackson, Ardarius Washington, Sanusi Kane, Bo Braden. All of them on the roster. This is a lot of safeties to keep, but it's about talent here. Ardarius obviously made the roster. There's no doubt about that. Sanusi Kane was their 7th rounder, and he's a hard hitter, physical safety. I was impressed with him in the preseason in the games he played. He makes this roster, and Bo Braid, they would absolutely lose to waivers. Someone would scoop him up. I think he has to make the roster, and he, in a good way, forced the Ravens' hand. It's a good thing that he did. He played all over the place, high energy, high motor, super physical as well, and showed off a bunch of different skill sets that as a back end safety, even if he is just a game day inactive most weeks for his rookie year, he's a guy that you want to keep around. So I usually go with anywhere from sometimes at 6 corners, 4 safeties, 6'5", but I went 6'6" here. So 12 total defensive back members. And obviously this does mean Pepe Williams gets left off of the roster, probably ending his time in Baltimore. If people wanted to argue Pepe over Bump Cooper, I'm sure that's going to come up. I just think Bump Cooper has more potential. And, Pepe's a third-year guy. Really struggled in the preseason, that last game, which it was struggle after struggle after struggle. And I think Bump Cooper did more to earn it. And, Pepe Williams is a guy that you root for, right? I was rooting for him, and I still am rooting for him. And if he makes the roster, I have no problem with it. But I just think Bump Cooper did more than Pepe Williams, so I am keeping Pepe Williams off of the roster. And then obviously special teams, Justin Tucker, Jordan Stout, and Nick Moore. So we do have time. I'll just get into the roster moves instead of in the final part of the show. We'll reserve that for more where else the Ravens could go. Let's just go into what I ended up doing with these guys. So the handshake deals, I forgot to add in Daryl Worley in that secondary conversation. So Daryl Worley is in that. But Brent Urban, Chris Board, and Daryl Worley, all handshake deals. Since they are vets, they don't have to pass through waivers. So if there's a handshake deal of, hey, we're going to let you go to open up this roster spot, but you're going to come right back after we continue to do the roster maneuvers. That is what has happened these past couple of years. And, the vets are used to it. So no harm, no foul with that. And I think they have 3 of those guys, Brent Urban, Chris Board, Daryl Worley. All right, now you can have 2 designated return spots for IR for the 53-man when you cut down. Usually guys who got put on IR during the 53-man cut down, they were automatically done for the season. Now you have 2 spots to put guys on designated to return during the cut down. That is where Adisa Isaac went. I think Adisa Isaac, it's going to be a little while. I don't know the specifics of it, but I'm just kind of spitballing here when I say, all right, what if they put Adisa Isaac on if his injury is what it is, you designate him to return. Same with Arthur Millette, right? Those 2 guys, they can come back after 4 weeks, I believe it is. And, that's kind of what happens. Now, if they believe the Millette can come back sooner than that, he might be on the roster. Isaac, same thing, where if they believe he can come back sooner, he'll be on the roster. But to kind of free up the roster space and then deal with the okay, who do we get rid of later? Injuries are going to pop up too. So, you hope nothing happens, obviously, and knock on wood, the Ravens can stay healthy as they can this year. But I think Isaac and Millette, those are my 2 predictions for designated to return spots. And then season-ending IR, Owen Wright, even though the injury is not season-ending, there is a world where the Ravens stash him on IR. So I'm predicting the Ravens stash Owen Wright. They stash Rasheen Ali, where it just, he has been out and not playing, and I think that he would not pass through waivers if they cut him. So I think they try to stash him on IR. And then Trayvon Mullen, who dislocated his shoulder, I believe either he gets released with an injury settlement or he gets put on season-ending IR as well. So then talking about practice squad priority, in this case, it would be guys like Devin Leary, obviously Pepe Williams, if he were to pass through, which I don't think he would. Josh Dupo for the veteran defensive tackle spot. Kadar Holman, they seem to really like as a corner. CJ Ravenel, they like. Evandy Rigby is an inside linebacker. I'm fine with Josh Jones on the practice squad. I'm okay with that. I think, again, Dalcourt, who I mentioned, Kadir Ismail, who I mentioned as well. I think that, there are going to be other guys. The Ravens usually try to get 1 or 2 other players on the practice squad from other teams. So I would not be shocked if the Ravens, there were one or two other guys that they would get on the roster. Emory Jones also could be one of these players. Chris Collier could be another one of them as well, depending on what happens in that situation. Because I could see, again, if John Kelly makes the roster, then Chris Collier could be the practice squad player. But I'm not expecting all Ravens to be on the practice squad. I do expect some other guys. Oh, and by the way, Anthony Miller. That's another one. Wide receiver-wise, Anthony Miller, Malik Cunningham. Those two probably would be my practice squad wide receivers. If you wanted to add a third to that conversation, wouldn't be shocked if it was Keith Kirkwood. I feel like they like Keith Kirkwood a lot. So maybe 3 wide receivers with Kadir Ismail as the tight end, a couple offensive linemen, a couple defensive linemen, inside linebackers, some secondary members, and obviously a quarterback as well. So I thought that this was a very well-rounded, balanced, and effective roster where you figure out the moves as they come, but you keep almost everybody who you'd probably lose to waivers. The only guy in this situation you're probably losing to waivers, or maybe 2, is Devin Leary and Pepe Williams. Other than that, I think you're pretty safe everywhere else. I think Dayton Wade doesn't pass through. I think Joe Evans doesn't pass through. I think Bump Cooper doesn't pass through. I think Bo Braid doesn't pass through. All those guys end up on the roster. So this is what I would do. I know that there are a lot of different conversations about, how to maneuver it, which guys are handshake deals or not. There are a bunch of different controversy points and question marks, but I thought overall this was a pretty good roster. So we'll see how many I get right. On Tuesday, we are going to go live right after the Ravens do their cut down day, right after they announce that. So we'll see. We can do a live count on the stream about how many I got right, how right or wrong I was. So that'll be fun. But yeah, very, very happy with the roster I ended up coming up with here. Kind of though in the final part of the show, we will be diving into if the Ravens could add in any other areas, guys they could target potentially, and could they make maybe a trade before the year starts? Stay tuned, plan to talk about it on the show. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. And FanDuel, I love going on there, seeing all they have to offer. We have something different for you right now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can get $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon at a market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So the Ravens and Chiefs open up on September 5th. And Ravens 2.5-point underdogs over on FanDuel. They opened up that. So if you like that line, you want to monitor it, head over to FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and download America's #1 sportsbook. And this show is brought to you by DK Law Group. When you need a law firm, do you want the legal runaround, or would you rather have a no-nonsense approach? Well, you get the latter with DK Law Group. DK Law Group is a Maryland-based law firm who is redefining the legal process with the modern approach. DK Law Group specializes in real estate law, estate planning, business law, and family law. They're tech-savvy, they treat clients like family, and they focus on keeping your legal solutions simple. DK Law Group is a woman-led firm with Diana Khan at the helm. Diana has been called an unparalleled legal expert by some. One of the things we quickly noticed with DK Law Group is their transparent pricing. They believe in clarity and cost, and no one left in limbo. DK Law Group knows that speed is key, but leveraging technology, DK Law Group streamlines the process to serve you better and faster. Contact DK Law Group today, dklawmd.com. Locked On listeners and call today to schedule a free 30-minute consultation when you mention the tagline, Empowering Legacies. We're back, our final segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher here with you still on this Monday edition of the show. Appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every single day. And we bring you 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. So if you're an everyday, you listen every day, watch every day, thank you for your consistent support. It really does mean the world to me. If you're new to the channel, new to the show, welcome in. Hopefully you're enjoying the content. Hopefully you stay a while, hit that subscribe button, that follow button. And if you're somewhere in the middle, welcome in to the show again. Tell a friend, tell a family member. If they're looking for daily Ravens coverage, we have them covered. So be sure to spread the word out there. I'd really appreciate that as well. Before we get into the final part of the show, final topics, I do want to take a moment. I wanted to take a moment in the beginning part of the third segment to just send my condolences to the Ravens and to the family of Joe DeLisandris. Obviously, the tragic news yesterday that he passed at 70 years old. He left the team a couple of weeks ago. That was classified as an acute illness. He went to deal with that. But it's sad. It's tragic. He's one of the most beloved people, and I never got the chance to meet Joe D, but just to hear the stories, he was loved by everybody. He left a mark on the world, and one thing about him is that he was someone that always cared. It seems like, from all the stories out there, he's someone that, you could always go to and about whatever. And he loved his players, from a football side of things. He was a phenomenal coach, and, it's a big loss on the field, but just 10,000 times more off of it with the person that he was. And, the Ravens have gone through a lot of tragedy these last few years, and, with player losses, coach losses, it's tough. I mean, there are a lot of wonderful people that have passed on in these last few years, and Joe D being the latest. And it's a tough blow to, an organization that he loved and that, loved him so much. And, again, condolences to his family, friends, the organization, everybody whose lives he touched. And, even just from the outside, right? He's someone that you could feel his impact. So it's a tough time for the Ravens community. And, man, it's heartbreaking. It is absolutely heartbreaking. So, now all we can do is remember his legacy, remember his life, and continue to talk about him in the way he deserves to be talked about, which is as a wonderful coach and a wonderful human. So just wanted to take the time to talk about Joe D, because I know the Ravens community is certainly hurting right now. But in terms of football, getting back into our conversation here on the show, there are other areas where the Ravens could potentially add at. And I think that the big one being running back right now with, Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook's the big name everybody is looking out for. I don't see it happening personally. I think for the third running back spot, you really want somebody that can play special teams. And if you want to bring in somebody who has running back 2 experience, or you want to use a guy as a running back 2 before Keaton Mitchell comes back, then Justice Hill probably gets more special team snaps. But with Justice Hill being that running back 2 for them, they don't probably want to play him as much on special teams because he has a big enough role where it's like, oh, well, if this guy goes down doing special teams, might, just the overall workload, that might be tough. So maybe Justice does play a bunch of special teams, but I don't think it'll be Dalvin Cook. I mentioned it on yesterday's show, the bonus episode we did, talking about the Ravens' tough roster decisions, but I don't know what that relationship looks like, because I feel like Dalvin was promised a role in Baltimore. The Ravens failed to deliver on that promise. It was very weird. And I feel like that bridge is kind of broken now. I feel like that's something that almost can't be repaired. I don't know about it. Right? This is just my guess. This is my guess, is that they promised him a role. He didn't get that role. And now it's like, okay, well, why'd you tell me? Because he was looking to sign with a contender that would give him a role for the playoffs. And he was like, where's a good situation for me? Obviously, he and Baltimore thought it was mutual. And I don't think it was malicious by the Ravens, obviously. It just, things worked out in different ways. And obviously, they just didn't run the ball in the championship game. So it's like, it wasn't even Dalvin not getting carries. Nobody got carries in the championship game. So again, I don't know what would happen there. Jarrett McKinnon is another option. Marlon Mack, Kareem Hunt. There are other guys out there. Wide receiver is an interesting one. I have him keeping 7 on my roster, but is there a veteran that needs to be brought in? The 2 that are on the market right now, Michael Thomas, Hunter Renfrow, are the 2 big names on the market. I'm sure a couple of others, much like the running back position, that will also be a point of conversation. Where are there going to be guys that get cut where you're like, oh, wasn't expecting that. Let's go see if we can get this guy. I'm sure that'll happen, even if it's just for the practice squad. There might be a guy or 2 like that. Offensive line is always tough because everybody needs it. There are rarely ever starting quality offensive lineman cut. That rarely happens because everybody needs starting quality offensive linemen, and the Ravens are so far down on the waiver order anyway. I don't really think they're going to get any of those guys. I could see them looking potentially at outside linebacker if the opportunity presents itself. Maybe a 3rd-string quarterback. Maybe Tyler Huntley gets cut by Cleveland and they revisit that again. I don't know how that. I know a lot of people might not be very fond of that idea, but it's something I keep coming back to. I'm not necessarily sure how that would work, but hey, you never know. Could happen. So I would not be shocked if Baltimore added 1 person to their 53 after cut down day. The position I'd probably most link it back to is running back again. There are bunch of teams might have to cut a good running back, and Baltimore might be ready to pounce on that opportunity. But they also have to figure out the roster space for the other handshake deal guys. What are they going to maneuver around? So it's not like there's a lot of room where the Ravens can just say, hey, we're going to add 5 people out off of waivers. They don't have that room. Their roster is they have too many guys they have to keep on their own roster. They can't just go out there and have a bunch of guys go and get cut for other guys on the waiver wire. That's not how it's probably going to work. So tough decisions ahead for the Ravens, as we've talked about. And again, tomorrow is roster cut down day. We'll be live here on Locked On Ravens after the Ravens announce their cuts. But before that, obviously, our regular 6 a.m. episode will be out on Tuesday morning, which will be diving more into just the roster in general and what could potentially happen. That's all I have for you here, though, today on this edition of Locked On Ravens. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, follow along, subscribe in audio form as well. It is free, and we have the same content for you both in video form and in audio form. Coming up tomorrow, more Ravens content for you. Of course, stay tuned. We'll see you right back in tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.